In the quiet breath of an ancient night, long before clocks existed and long before the world learned to fear the silence of disappearance, there once stood a place where knowledge glowed brighter than fire. A place where the soft crackling of papyrus scrolls was more sacred than prayer, and where the whisper of the sea carried the dreams of thousands. This was the Library of Alexandria, the beating heart of ancient wisdom, the sanctuary of curious minds, and the final refuge for countless forgotten stories. They say the library was so vast that the sun itself paused above its marble roofs, lingering for a moment longer as if trying to read what humans had written. They say the hallways smelled of ink, honey oil, dried flowers, and ocean salt, a fragrance that could calm even the most restless soul. And they say that every night, when the waves grew quiet and the lanterns flickered low, the librarians would read aloud to the stars, believing that the universe listened back. This story begins not with kings or conquerors, but with a young woman, Callista, whose hands carried the dust of old worlds and whose eyes burned brighter than candlelight. She was a cataloger of forgotten languages, a translator of broken scrolls, a keeper of memories that even time had tried to erase. She walked the marbled corridors with the gentleness of a falling leaf, collecting fragments of lost civilizations and stitching them back into meaning. To her, the library was alive. It breathed through its columns. It whispered through its parchment. It sighed every time a door opened to let in the sea breeze. But every breath of the library carried another truth. A truth nobody dared to speak aloud. Nothing this beautiful is ever meant to last forever. For 9 centuries, the Library of Alexandria stood untouched, rising and falling like the tide of history itself. Scholars traveled across deserts, across oceans, across empires just to read in its golden halls. Women who were never allowed to learn in their own cities found refuge among its scrolls. Philosophers debated in candlelit chambers. Astronomers mapped the stars from its rooftop garden. Poets slept beside their unfinished verses. But somewhere between time and fate, between human greed and human mistake, between fire and water, the great library began to slowly crack. First in shadows, then in whispers, then in flames no one could stop. And Callista, the quiet girl who spent her life preserving other people's stories, would become the final witness of the greatest story of all. The disappearance of the world's first and greatest library. This is not a story of destruction. It is a story of preservation. A story of women who hid scrolls beneath their cloaks. A story of mothers who taught their daughters forbidden words. A story of ocean winds carrying lost knowledge across the centuries. A story of the gentle, silent, aching beauty of a place the world should never have forgotten. Tonight, as rain murmurs outside your window and your heartbeat slows into sleep, allow yourself to walk once more through those candlelit chambers. Hear the soft turning of ancient pages. Feel the warmth of oil lamps reflecting on marble floors. Breathe the ocean air drifting through open arches. Because the Library of Alexandria may be gone, but its story still remains. And like all stories meant for the night, it waits for you in the quiet. Close your eyes. Follow the sound of the sea. And step into the centuries that refuse to fade. When Callista first saw the Library of Alexandria, she was only 12. The morning sun had just begun to rise over the horizon, and a soft mist floated above the ocean, turning everything around her into a watercolor dream. The harbor smelled of salt and wet rope, of warm sand and the faint sweetness of figs carried by merchants walking along the docks. Ships rocked gently, their sails fluttering like tired wings after long journeys. And between those ships stood a girl who had traveled farther than most adults would in their entire lives. Callista had come from a small coastal village, one so quiet and hidden that its name rarely appeared on maps. Her mother whispered stories of great cities and ancient halls, of scholars who spoke with the stars, of librarians who could read languages older than the moon. But Callista had never believed such places truly existed, until the morning her village elders sent her away with a bundle of scroll fragments and a message sealed with wax. "You have a gift," they had told her. "A memory like still water, a mind that hears silence. Go where your hands will be useful." She didn't understand the meaning then. She only understood the rocking of the wooden boat and the way her mother's hands trembled when she let go of Callista's fingers for the last time. And now, standing in front of the library, she understood everything. The structure rose like a mountain carved by gods. Columns taller than palm trees stood in perfect rows, gleaming softly in the gentle morning light. Arches curved above them with delicate artwork, painted vines, lotus flowers, celestial symbols, names of ancient scholars whose stories had been whispered for centuries. Pigeons walked along the marble edges, cooing softly as if claiming ownership of the sacred place. Callista felt the breeze shift, brushing against her hair as if encouraging her to take another step. And so she did. Inside, the world changed. The air was warm and smelled of saffron, candle wax, dried herbs, and ink. Hundreds, no, thousands of scrolls lay in wooden cubbies, stacked so high that a long rope ladder hung from the ceiling for librarians to climb. Marble floors glowed like soft moonlight beneath her feet. Lamps made from bronze bowls burned quietly in alcoves, each flame dancing gently as if whispering secrets only fire understood. Callista wasn't alone. Women walked through the halls with graceful steps, carrying bundles of papyrus, jars of ink, woven baskets filled with tiny clay tablets. Some wore simple linen dresses, others wore beautifully folded robes with colors like autumn leaves. Their hair was tied in braids, wrapped with golden pins shaped like lotus petals. Their faces were calm, focused, peaceful. One woman noticed Callista and paused. Her name was Thalia, a senior scribe, known for her gentle discipline and her voice soft as river reeds. She studied Callista the way someone studies a newly discovered artifact, not with suspicion but with wonder. "You came with the morning tide," Thalia said. "And the sea brings only those who are meant to arrive." Callista lowered her gaze, shy in the presence of someone who walked with such confidence. "I was sent," she whispered. "My village said the library accepts fragments. They said someone here can read what no one else can." Thalia reached for the small bundle Callista held pressed against her chest. The scroll fragments were old, older than the stone beneath their feet, faded into colors that no longer existed in the world. She unwrapped them carefully, like someone holding a newborn child. "These markings," Thalia breathed, "this script hasn't been seen in decades." Callista blinked nervously. "I can remember them. I don't know how, but when I see the shapes, they stay." Thalia looked at her with something like surprise. "A memory keeper." Callista frowned. "Is that important?" Thalia smiled softly, the corners of her eyes crinkling. "In this place, it is everything." That was the morning Callista became an apprentice of the Library of Alexandria. The days that followed unfolded like petals of a slow, ancient flower. She learned how to prepare papyrus by soaking reeds in water until they softened. She learned the rhythmic brushing of ink made from soot, oil, and crushed berries. She learned how to read alphabets with loops, dots, spirals, straight lines, broken strokes, alphabets that had died when empires fell. And she learned how quietness could feel alive. Every evening, when the sun dipped into the ocean and the halls grew dim, the librarians lit long rows of oil lamps along the walls. The library transformed into a golden cave, glowing with warmth and history. Shadows stretched across the floors like giant cats sleeping peacefully under the columns. Callista always sat in the same spot, near a tall window where the sea breeze slipped through with a personality of its own. She worked there until her fingers were stained with ink and her eyes felt heavy with sleep. One night, Thalia approached her. "You work harder than the eldest scribes," she said gently. Callista shook her head. "I just want to learn." Thalia smiled. "You don't just learn, child, you listen, and the library listens back." Callista didn't understand what she meant, not yet. But she did feel something. Whenever she touched an ancient scroll, whenever she pieced fragments together, whenever she breathed in the scent of old papyrus, she felt the past humming beneath her fingertips. As if the library was alive. As if it had been waiting for her. But there was something else too. Something she couldn't quite name. On some nights, when the moonlight angled just right, and the sea outside grew too quiet, she felt a flicker of cold air moving through the hallways. Like the whisper of something coming. Something hidden. Something ancient, waiting in the dark corners of the library's memory. Callista didn't know then that she would spend her life uncovering that whisper. And she didn't know that one day she would be the last person to hear it. The first winter Callista spent in the Library of Alexandria didn't feel like winter at all. The city rarely knew snow, and even the coldest nights carried the warmth of distant desert winds. But inside the library, winter lived in different ways, not through frost, but through silence, through long stretches of darkness, through the steady rhythm of lamps burning low against the cool stone walls. Callista learned quickly that night was the true heartbeat of the library. Daytime was for scholars. Busy footsteps, murmured debates, scribes rushing between rooms like bees carrying pollen. But at night, when most had left and only a handful of women remained, the library transformed into something else entirely. A quiet world. A world that breathed. One evening, Thalia placed a small bronze lamp in Callista's hands. "It's time," she said. "For what?" Callista asked. "To see the Hall of Whispering Lamps." Callista had heard about the hall from older scribes, stories told in fragments, always in hushed tones. Some said it was where the oldest scrolls rested. Others said it was a place where fire never went out. A few whispered that it was alive. Thalia led her through a narrow passage Callista had never noticed before, a stone corridor with walls carved in patterns resembling waves. She traced the designs with her fingers as she walked, feeling the cool stone ripple under her skin like frozen water. "The architects built this hall to mimic the sea," Thalia explained. "They believed knowledge moves like tides, coming, going, returning." At the end of the corridor stood a tall wooden door, darker than any Callista had seen. Not painted, not polished, just ancient. The wood held deep grooves, as if 1,000 hands had touched it before her. Thalia pressed her palm against the center, and the door opened with a soft sigh. The hall inside glowed. Hundreds of bronze lamps lined the walls, small, simple, elegant. Their flames flickered like breathing creatures, warm and gentle. Shadows danced across the ceiling in swirling shapes, merging with carvings of birds, stars, boats, and running script. Callista stepped inside and felt immediately as if she had entered the mind of the library itself. The air was warm but not heavy. It smelled of olive oil, warmed clay, and the faintest hint of dried lavender. "This," Callista whispered, "this place feels alive." Thalia nodded. "Because it is." They walked slowly between the rows of lamps. Each bronze bowl held a tiny clay wick, glowing with a flame no larger than a tear, yet bright enough to illuminate the entire hall. "Who lights them?" Callista asked. We do, Thalia said. Every night and every morning we let them rest. Callista looked at the flickering lights, mesmerized. What happens if one goes out? Thalia smiled. Then another burns brighter. They reached a stone platform at the end of the hall. On it lay an enormous scroll, thick, aged, wrapped in silk threads. Callista inhaled sharply. What is that? The oldest record we possess, Thalia said. Not the oldest in the world, but the oldest the library has guarded without interruption. Callista approached carefully. The scroll looked fragile, as if a single careless breath could turn it to dust. Yet it radiated strength, 9 centuries of survival etched into its fibers. Where did it come from? She asked. No one knows, Thalia whispered. Some say it was here before the library existed. Some say it was found in a shipwreck. Others say a woman carried it across deserts. Callista's heartbeat slowed. A woman's. Thalia nodded. There have always been women who saved knowledge when no one else would. Callista stared at the scroll with new reverence. She wondered how many hands had carried it, how many nights it had survived, how many voices had whispered its secrets. She reached out, but her fingers trembled. May I touch it? You may learn to, Thalia said gently. But not yet. First, you must understand how to listen. Listen, Callista echoed. Knowledge has sound, Thalia said softly. Not in the way wind or waves have sound. It has a vibration, a pattern, a pulse. When you can feel it, then you can handle the oldest scrolls. Callista swallowed, her throat tight. But what if I never learn? Thalia placed a hand on her shoulder. You will. The library brought you here because you hear things others cannot. Callista lowered her gaze. I just remember shapes. Memory, Thalia said, is the beginning of listening. They walked slowly between the lamps again. Callista noticed something she hadn't before. Each flame flickered differently. Some danced quickly, others swayed lazily, some burned steady and tall, while others trembled at the slightest movement. Thalia watched her carefully. Oh, you see it. Yes, Callista whispered. The flames feel like voices, all speaking their own language. That is why this hall is called the Hall of Whispering Lamps, Thalia said. When the library breathes, the lamps speak. Callista closed her eyes. She listened. Not with her ears, but with something deeper. The flames murmured. Soft, rhythmic, ancient. They carried the weight of centuries. Storms weathered, rulers changed, scrolls saved, civilizations remembered. Callista felt her heartbeat slow, matching the flicker patterns. Her fingertips tingled. She opened her eyes and looked at Thalia. I hear it. Thalia smiled, as though she had been waiting for this moment. Good, because this hall will one day speak to you alone. A cold breeze slipped through the gaps in the stone unexpected, like a warning or a promise. The lamps flickered all at once. Callista gasped. Did you feel that? Thalia's expression changed. Softer. Sadder. Knowing. Yes, she whispered. The library feels it too. Callista waited, but Thalia said nothing more. Instead, she guided her gently back to the main hall, leaving the whispering lamps behind. But Callista didn't forget. She felt something shift in her chest. Something like a door opening. something like a voice calling her name. And she knew. Whatever that cold whisper had been, it wasn't the last time she would feel it. Because the library was alive. And something deep inside it had just awakened. Weeks passed, and Callista slowly learned the quiet rhythm of life inside the Library of Alexandria. She copied scrolls until her fingers ached, mixed ink until her wrists smelled of crushed berries, and read until her eyes blurred. But each night, when the lamps were lit and the world softened into amber light, she returned to the tall window facing the sea. Something about that window made her feel anchored, as if the ocean breeze carried messages meant only for her. But one evening, everything changed. Callista had just finished organizing a bundle of scroll fragments when she noticed a stranger walking down the corridor, a woman she had never seen before. Her steps were slow, deliberate, like someone who had walked across deserts in storms. Her skin held a warm bronze shade, her long dark hair braided tightly with threads of gold, and her robe was woven in patterns Callista didn't recognize. She carried nothing in her hands, yet her presence felt heavy, as if she carried centuries within her. Callista froze. The woman stopped in front of her and tilted her head, studying Callista with quiet intensity. "You are the one they whisper about," the woman said, her voice low but strangely melodic. "The girl who remembers everything." Callista swallowed. "I don't know what they whisper." The woman nodded once, the faintest hint of a smile touching her lips. "That is because you listen more than you speak." Callista felt her cheeks warm. She lowered her eyes, unsure whether it was a compliment or something else entirely. "I am Lysandra," the woman said. "Guardian of the Western Shelves." Callista blinked. She had heard that name only in fragments, always spoken with reverence. The Western Shelves were the oldest section of the library, accessible to only a handful of senior scholars. No apprentice ever entered there. "I didn't know guardians still existed," Callista whispered. Lysandra laughed softly. "Most people forget the quietest protectors." Callista looked up at her. "Why are you here?" Lysandra stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Because the library is changing. It has begun to shift in ways it has not for centuries." Callista felt a shiver run down her spine. Thalia said something similar. Lysandra nodded. "She feels it too, but you." Her eyes softened. "You hear it more deeply. The lamps flickered for you. The cold wind moved through the halls when you entered." Callista hesitated. "I don't understand what that means." "It means," Lysandra said gently, "that the library has chosen you." Callista's heart stuttered. "Why me?" "Because you carry memory," Lysandra said. "And memory is what holds worlds together long after they fall apart." Lysandra motioned for Callista to follow. They walked down a side corridor Callista had never noticed before, its walls carved with swirling patterns of waves and stars, its lamps shaped like tiny lotus buds. The deeper they went, the cooler the air became, carrying the faint scent of old paper and ocean stone. Finally, they reached a wide room with a domed ceiling painted in faded blues and golds. Scrolls lined the walls from floor to arch, each wrapped carefully in silk bands. In the center stood a stone basin filled with water. Lysandra gestured to it. "This is the Basin of Echoes." "What does it do?" Callista asked. "It remembers sound," Lysandra said. "Words spoken near it linger, sometimes for years." Callista stared at the water. It was still, so still it looked like glass. "May I hear something?" Lysandra nodded. Callista leaned over the basin. At first there was nothing, just silence. Then, a faint whisper. A woman's voice. Soft, trembling, ancient. I carried them through fire. I carried them through the night. Callista jerked back. What was that? A memory, Lysandra said, her expression unreadable. Left by a woman who lived centuries ago. She was one of the library's final protectors, before one of the great fires. Callista felt her stomach tighten. She saved scrolls. She saved knowledge, Lysandra replied. The kind that would have been lost forever. Callista stared at the basin again, her heart pounding. Why are you showing me this? She whispered. Because, Lysandra said softly, one day you may have to choose what to save. Callista felt a coldness bloom inside her. And choose what? Lysandra looked at her with a mixture of sorrow and pride. The library. Callista's breath caught. I don't understand. You will, Lysandra said, when the time comes. They walked back toward the main halls, but Callista felt different now, heavier, as if someone had placed a scroll full of secrets on her shoulders. Lysandra, Callista said finally. Oh, yes. Has the library ever spoken to you? Lysandra paused. Once. What did it say? Lysandra smiled faintly. That it remembers everything and everyone. Callista shivered. When she returned to her usual window seat, she watched the sea for a long time. The horizon glowed in shades of gold and rose, and waves rolled gently against the shore, whispering their own stories. For the first time since arriving, Callista felt the weight of the library settle around her, not as a burden, but as a quiet presence. A companion, a living silence watching her. As the night deepened and the others drifted away, Callista remained alone in the hall, listening to the soft crackle of lamps and to something else. Something faint. Something distant. Something like a heartbeat hidden beneath stone. And she knew. The whisper she had felt in the Hall of Lamps. The cold breeze. The shifting silence. It wasn't imagination. It was a beginning. A warning. Or perhaps a calling. Either way, it was hers. Several months passed after Callista's encounter with Lysandra, yet the unease in the air lingered like the scent of a storm waiting just beyond the horizon. It wasn't something one could see or touch. It was something felt, deep, subtle, woven into the cracks of marble floors and the flicker of lamps. The library was still magnificent, still alive, still full of the gentle hum of turning pages and scratching quills. But at night, when the last footsteps faded and only a handful of women remained in the halls, Callista sensed something beneath the usual peace. A strain. A tension. A quiet warning. One evening, the sea was unusually loud. Waves crashed against the stone harbor wall with a restless rhythm, as though the ocean had become impatient. Callista stood by her window, ink drying on her fingertips, watching the swell of dark water rolling under the moon. Celia approached her quietly. You feel it too, don't you? She said. Callista didn't answer at first. She simply nodded. Thalia sighed, her shoulders heavy. The sea speaks before the world does, the library listens, and now so do you. Callista kept her eyes fixed on the water. Is something coming? Thalia didn't reply. Instead, she placed a warm hand on Callista's shoulder. No matter what comes, child, the library has always survived. Callista wished she believed that. Before she could speak again, the great bronze doors at the far end of the hall creaked open. Lysandra entered, her robe carrying grains of sand and a smell of cold night air. She looked as though she had been standing by the sea for hours. "Thalia," she said, her voice low, "they're arriving." Callista turned sharply. "Who?" Lysandra's eyes flicked toward her. "Ships," she said, "too many for this hour, too quiet for traders." A chill ran through Callista's spine. "Are they dangerous?" she whispered. Thalia and Lysandra exchanged a glance that told her everything she needed to know. "Callista," Thalia said gently, "come with us." They led her down a long corridor toward the library's western observation balcony, a place she had never been. The balcony overlooked the harbor directly, offering a wide view of moonlit waves crashing gently against the stone docks. But tonight, the waves were not gentle. And the harbor was not empty. Callista gasped. Dark silhouettes of ships, dozens of them, floated silently just beyond the torchlight. No lanterns burned on their decks, no banners fluttered, no voices called across the water. Just shadows. Waiting. "Who are they?" Callista whispered. "Travelers," Lysandra said. "Migrants. Refugees. Soldiers." Thalia shook her head. "We do not know, but we know this. No ship arrives so late, so quietly, without reason." Callista couldn't tear her eyes away. One ship drifted closest, its hull scraping the edge of the dock. A single figure stepped off, a woman with a small child wrapped tightly against her chest. Her robe was torn, her hair tangled from sea wind, her arms trembling with exhaustion. Callista's breath caught. Before she realized what she was doing, she ran down the hallway and descended the long stone staircase toward the entrance courtyard. Thalia called after her, but Callista didn't stop. She reached the harbor just as the woman collapsed onto her knees, clutching her child. Callista rushed forward. "Are you hurt? Please, can I help?" The woman lifted her head. Her eyes were dark and wide with fear. "You must hide us," she whispered. Callista froze. "Hide you from whom?" The woman's voice shook. "They burned our city," she whispered. "They burn everything. They took the scrolls, they took our healers." Her words broke into sobs. "They will come for the library next." Thunder rolled across the sky, quiet but deep, like distant drums. Callista swallowed hard. "Who are they?" The woman grasped her arm with shaking fingers. "Those who fear knowledge," she said. "Those who burn what they cannot understand." Before Callista could ask more, Thalia and Lysandra arrived beside her. Thalia knelt and placed her hands gently on the woman's shoulders. "You are safe now," Thalia said softly. "No fire touches these halls." The woman looked at her with desperate eyes. "They are coming." Lysandra's expression was sharp as a blade. "How many?" "Hundreds," the woman said. "Maybe more." Lysandra stood, her jaw tensing. "Thalia, take her inside. Bring food, blankets, anything she needs." Thalia nodded and guided the trembling woman and child toward the library's entrance. Callista remained rooted in place. Lysandra turned to her. "You should go inside." But Callista didn't move. "The library, it's in danger." Lysandra exhaled slowly. "Oh, yes." Callista felt a weight crash into her chest, a heavy, cold pressure. Why would anyone harm this place? It holds knowledge, not weapons. Knowledge can be a weapon, Lysandra said. For those who fear it. The sea roared again, louder this time, and a sharp wind whipped through Callista's hair, carrying the scent of smoke, distant but real. Lysandra, Callista whispered. Will the library survive? Lysandra looked at her, her voice softer than she intended. That depends on us. Callista swallowed the rising fear. I'm not strong enough, she said, her voice cracking. I'm only an apprentice. I can't protect anything. Lysandra stepped closer and placed a hand over Callista's heart. You have something stronger than force, she whispered. You have memory, and memory is what outlives fire. Callista's eyes stung with tears. Lysandra continued, her voice low, steady, ancient. Someday, when the walls tremble and the lamps flicker and the scrolls are threatened, it will be you who decides what survives. Not because you choose it, but because the library chose you. A sudden gust of wind extinguished the torches along the dock. All at once, the harbor fell silent. The ship stopped moving. The waves calmed. It felt like the world was holding its breath. Callista whispered, barely audible. What happens now? And somewhere in the distance, closer than before, she heard it. A scream. A child's cry. The crack of something breaking. Lysandra's eyes hardened. Now, she said, we prepare. The night after the refugees arrived, the library did not sleep. Oil lamps burned long past dawn. Shadows trembled against the marble walls. Quiet voices murmured behind closed chambers as librarians met in hurried circles. Some anxious, some angry, all afraid to let their fears show. Callista drifted among them, unnoticed except by Thalia and Lysandra. Other scholars walked past her with scrolls clutched to their chests, whispering in languages she did not recognize. Women carried baskets of dried herbs and jars of water to treat the sick who had arrived on the silent ships. The library, normally a sanctuary of calm, had become a hive of controlled panic. Yet through it all, the ocean continued whispering against the stones. Restless, warning. That morning, Callista found Thalia in the scriptorium, her hands trembling as she sorted through a pile of old scrolls. What can I do? Callista asked. Thalia's eyes were tired. You can start by breathing, she said softly. Callista tried. The air tasted of smoke, faint, distant, but unmistakable. Thalia, how close are they? Thalia inhaled deeply. The woman said the fires had spread to the outer towns near the coast. If that's true, she shook her head, we must act as if danger is near. Callista looked down at the scrolls. Are we moving them? Thalia nodded. We are choosing which ones must survive. Callista felt the floor tilt beneath her. Choosing which ones? Oh, yes. But that's impossible. Every scroll matters. Every scroll matters, Thalia agreed, but not every scroll can be saved. Callista closed her eyes, swallowing hard. This is wrong, she whispered. It is necessary, Thalia said. Callista, listen to me. Some scrolls hold stories, others hold knowledge. But a few, only a few, hold the foundation of entire civilizations. Those must be protected first. Callista touched one of the scrolls gently. It was frayed at the edges, stained with age, yet still warm from the hands of those who had carried it before. What will happen to the rest? She asked. Thalia hesitated. We will do what we can, but the library is vast. Time is not. Before Callista could speak again, Lysandra appeared in the doorway, her expression stern. Thalia, council meeting, now. Thalia nodded and turned to leave, but paused beside Callista. Child, she said gently, stay close. Wherever you are needed, we will call. Callista watched them disappear into the corridor. Her hands shook. A moment later, a soft voice spoke behind her. You care for them. Callista turned to find the refugee woman, the mother who had arrived with the torn robe and frightened eyes. She stood in the corner holding her sleeping child, wrapped now in a warm linen cloth. Are you feeling better? Callista asked. The woman nodded slowly. I am safe here, she said, but safety is never certain. Callista glanced around the room. What happened to your home? The woman's eyes filled with tears. They burned our records, she whispered. They burned our healers' books, our birth scrolls, our maps, everything that held our past. Callista felt a deep ache settle in her chest. Why? She whispered. Because knowledge frightens them, the woman said. They believe ignorance keeps them strong. Callista pressed a hand over her mouth. I didn't know. The woman stepped closer. You remind me of someone I once knew, she said softly. A girl who guarded stories the way others guarded their children. Callista blinked, startled. Guarded stories. The woman nodded. She used to say that when a scroll burns, the world becomes smaller, but when a scroll survives. Her voice broke. The world remains vast. Callista's throat tightened. Did she survive? The woman shook her head. She died protecting what she believed in. Callista looked down at her hands. They felt small, trembling, unprepared. I'm not strong like that, she whispered. The woman touched her cheek gently. Strength does not always roar, she said. Sometimes it whispers. Callista met her eyes. Do you think we can save the library? The woman looked toward the great marble halls. The library is more than stone, she said. It is memory. Memory survives in places fire cannot reach. Before Callista could reply, the doors burst open and Lysandra strode into the room, her expression urgent. Callista, she said, come with me. Callista followed her down the corridor, past scholars debating in panicked voices, past women clutching scrolls to their hearts, past the flickering shadows that danced against the frescoed walls. Where are we going? Callista asked, breathless. To the lower chambers, Lysandra said. There is something you must see. They descended a narrow staircase into a dim room lit by only a few lamps. Stone shelves lined the walls, covered by thick linen curtains. Lysandra pulled one aside. Callista gasped. These, she whispered, these aren't scrolls. No, Lysandra said. They are codices, the earliest books. Callista reached out slowly, tracing the wooden cover of one with her fingertips. Why are they here? She asked. Lysandra looked at her. Because these can survive what scrolls cannot. Callista's breath caught in her throat. You're hiding them, she whispered. Lysandra nodded. Yes, and you will help me. Callista looked up sharply. Why me? Because, Lysandra said softly, you are the only apprentice who knows how to move silently. Callista frowned. I don't understand. Tonight, Lysandra said, we begin the evacuation. Callista's pulse quickened. Evacuation. Oh, yes. Lysandra's voice dropped to a whisper. We are moving the library. Callista felt her world tilt again. What's where? Underground, Lysandra said. To the chambers built centuries ago for this purpose. Callista stared at her. I never knew those existed. You were not meant to, but now. Lysandra touched Callista's arm. You are part of the library's memory. Callista felt a tremor of something she could not name. Fear, awe, purpose. Lysandra, she whispered, how much time do we have? Lysandra closed her eyes for a moment. Not enough. A deep, distant rumble echoed through the walls, so faint it could have been thunder. Or something else. Lysandra opened her eyes. Callista, she said, her voice steady. It begins tonight. The library's underground chambers were a secret whispered only among the oldest librarians, women whose hair had silvered with decades of quiet service. Callista, still so new to these halls, had never imagined such a place existed. But that night, when Lysandra pressed a torch into her hand and led her toward a door hidden behind a heavy tapestry, Callista felt her heartbeat echo against the stone. The tapestry depicted the Nile at flood, water rising beneath moonlight, crocodiles moving like shadows along the banks. Callista had passed it 100 times without looking twice. Now, Lysandra pulled the cloth aside and revealed a narrow stone archway, its edges carved with ancient symbols that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Callista inhaled sharply. You mean this was here all along? Lysandra nodded. Every library must have its spine. This one has roots as deep as the sea. She pushed against the stone door, and it opened with a slow, groaning sound. Cold air drifted out, carrying the smell of earth, old wood, and something metallic, like the taste of forgotten years. Come, Lysandra said. They stepped inside, and the door closed behind them, sealing the chamber in darkness until Lysandra relit her torch. Callista blinked until her eyes adjusted. The chamber stretched deep into the earth, with arched ceilings supported by massive stone columns. Wooden beams lined the walls, shelves carved directly into the stone, and narrow passages branched off in every direction like veins beneath the skin. Callista shivered. It feels different down here. Lysandra nodded. This place was built centuries before you were born, before I was born, before many of the scrolls upstairs were even written. Callista ran her fingertips over the stone. Why were they hidden? Because knowledge needs somewhere to hide, Lysandra said simply. When the world forgets its own gentleness. Callista looked around. But why now? Why bring me here? Lysandra paused, her eyes reflecting firelight. Because the library listens, she said quietly. And it has been listening to you. Callista swallowed, unsure how to respond. Lysandra led her deeper into the chamber, where a group of women stood waiting, senior librarians, all with torches in hand. Some Callista recognized, others she had only seen from a distance. But every face shared the same expression, solemn, determined, afraid only in the quietest way. Thalia was among them. Callista, she said softly, we have much to do. What must I do? Callista asked. Thalia held up a small wooden tablet. You will help us move the oldest scrolls. Callista blinked. But why me? There are so many others who know more than I do. Because you remember, Thalia said. And because you listen to things others cannot hear. Lysandra added, and because you do not yet fear the burden. Callista hesitated. What if I lose something? What if I break? You won't, Thalia interrupted gently. You move as though you have done this before. Callista opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. She didn't know why, but part of her did understand this place. Not with knowledge. With instinct. Lysandra handed her a wrapped bundle. This, she said, is one of the oldest pieces we possess. A record of the early mathematicians, women who mapped the stars long before men claimed the sky. Callista held the bundle tightly. It felt warm, almost alive. Where do I take it? She asked. Follow me, Lysandra said. They walked to a smaller side chamber. Inside were narrow shelves carved into the stone walls, each lined with cedar planks. The air here smelled of resin and old ink, sharp enough to sting the nostrils. This is the first vault, Lysandra said. Only what must never be lost will go here. Callista gently placed the scroll inside a cedar-lined niche. As she stepped back, the flame from her torch flickered, casting shadows across the walls, shadows that looked like moving figures, dancing just out of reach. She shivered. Lysandra, she whispered, what happens if they find the entrance? They won't, Lysandra said. Not unless someone shows them. Callista turned to look at her sharply. You think someone might betray the library? Lysandra hesitated before answering. There are always those who believe survival is more important than truth. Callista felt something cold settle inside her. How many scrolls do we need to move? She asked. Thalia joined them, her arms full of wrapped manuscripts. As many as we can carry, she said. Knowledge is heavy, but it is worth its weight. Callista nodded. Hours passed, though time felt strange underground. They moved scrolls, wax tablets, codices bound with linen threads. Sometimes Callista paused to read the edges. Names of forgotten healers, astronomers, poets, midwives, mothers who recorded birth rituals, women who mapped storms, herbalists who catalogued plants that no longer grew. Callista felt each name like a breath against her skin. These were written by women, she whispered. Thalia smiled. Far more than history remembers. Callista touched one scroll gently, her voice cracking. And we are saving them. Lysandra looked at her. No, she said gently. You are saving them. Callista's throat tightened. She had never thought she would matter in a place like this. She had never thought her memory, her quiet, her listening could mean something real. But now, as her hands moved between ancient shelves, as she breathed in the scent of old ink and cedar, as the sea rumbled in the distance like a slow heartbeat, she felt something shift. A purpose. A weight. A destiny. Suddenly, a deep vibration shook the stone floor beneath them. Callista stumbled. Thalia grabbed her arm. It's beginning. What is? Callista whispered. Lysandra's torch flared. The approach. Callista heard it then. Not the soft lap of waves. Not the distant hum of tides. But the deep, rhythmic pounding of feet. Hundreds of them. Marching. The sound traveled through the earth, rumbling like thunder rolling across mountains. They're here, Lysandra said quietly. Callista's breath caught. What do we do? Lysandra extinguished her torch. We go deeper. The earth vibrated beneath Callista's feet as though the entire city trembled in warning. Dust drifted from the ceiling, catching the faint torchlight like falling stars. The librarians froze for a moment, Thalia clutching a bundle of scrolls, Lysandra gripping the edge of a cedar shelf, listening to the rhythm of approaching footsteps. They were slow at first. Measured. Orderly. Then they grew louder, heavier, like a storm gathering strength. Boots against stone. Voices echoing in the harbor. Metal clinking. The unmistakable scrape of shields being raised. Callista's breath hitched. There inside the city, she whispered. Lysandra didn't answer. Her jaw tightened. Thalia stepped forward. We must move the last of the scrolls before they reach the upper halls. Callista swallowed her fear and nodded, her pulse pounding in her ears. They worked quickly, their movements silent and practiced. Scrolls were wrapped in linen, codices secured with leather ties, wax tablets stacked neatly and bound with rope. Callista moved between the shelves with surprising agility, her fingers memorizing the feel of each artifact, its weight, its temperature, the faint scent of ink that clung to it. But the tremors grew stronger. A heavy thud reverberated through the stone walls, followed by another. Callista stiffened. What was that? She asked. Lysandra exchanged a grim look with Thalia. They're breaking the outer gates, Thalia murmured. The torches flickered violently. Another thud, louder this time. Then a crash. Several librarians gasped. They've entered the courtyard, a voice whispered from behind them. Callista turned to see Maria, a young librarian whose braids were coming undone from fear. She held a sleeping child, one of the refugees who had been brought in earlier. They're lighting torches outside, Maria breathed. The windows are glowing orange. Callista felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Fire! Lysandra's voice cut through the panic. Everyone, she said firmly, stay calm. The library has survived fire before. It will survive again. Her certainty was steady, but her eyes revealed something else. A fear. Another crash shook the ceiling. Pebbles rained down. A cracked line spread along the upper arch like a growing vine. Callista grabbed Lysandra's arm. We must go deeper, she whispered. You said there were more chambers. There are, Lysandra replied. But some knowledge must remain accessible. If we hide everything, the library becomes nothing. Callista didn't understand, but she didn't have time to argue. A sudden blast of heated air rushed down the stairwell above them. Thalia turned pale. They've set fire to the entrance. Callista's breath caught. What do we do? Lysandra's tone sharpened. We protect what we can. Follow me. They moved quickly through a smaller corridor branching off from the first vault. The walls here were damp, lined with thick layers of plaster to insulate the chambers. The air grew colder as they descended, and the tremors above softened into a distant rumble. Callista tried to steady her breathing. When they reached a dead end, Lysandra pressed her palm against the wall. It slid open. Callista gasped. Behind the wall was a narrow staircase, spiraling downward into pitch darkness. This way, Lysandra said. This chamber hasn't been used in centuries. They descended, the torches casting long shadows across the curved stone. When they reached the bottom, Callista realized the room wasn't empty. It was full of lamps. Hundreds of them. Suspended from the ceiling like glowing fruit, each one burning silently, their flames steady and bright despite the shaking ground above. The Hall of Whispering Lamps. Callista's lips parted. This is the same hall. It is connected to many places, Lysandra said. It was built to survive collapse. Thalia stepped into the center, her eyes scanning the lamps. Callista, she said softly. Listen. Callista closed her eyes. She heard it immediately. A hum. Not from people. Not from the lamps. From the library itself. A low, trembling vibration, fear, age, warning, memory, everything woven into one haunting note. The lamps flickered in response, their flames swaying in a synchronized motion like breathing. Callista felt the pulse rise through her feet, climb her spine, settle in her chest. It's scared, she whispered. The library is scared. Lysandra placed a hand on her shoulder. Yes, she said, but it is also awake. Callista turned to her. Awake. The library is ancient, Lysandra said. It thinks slowly, it feels deeply, and tonight it remembers every danger it has ever faced. Callista's eyes widened. Then it knows what's coming. Oh, yes. Another violent crash shook dust from the ceiling. Muffled shouting echoed through the upper chambers. Thalia's voice trembled. They've broken into the outer halls. The lamps began to quiver, tiny halos trembling, flames shrinking, then growing again as if inhaling courage. Callista felt tears sting her eyes. They're fighting, she whispered. Lysandra nodded. The lamps hold memory. When the library is threatened, the memories burn brighter. Callista watched, mesmerized. Some flames stretched tall and defiant. Others danced wildly, sparks jumping like fleeing thoughts. The entire hall seemed alive, warm, trembling, ancient. A scream echoed faintly from above. Callista clasped her hands over her mouth. They're hurting people. Thalia closed her eyes. We cannot save everyone. Callista's voice cracked. But we can save this. Yes, Lysandra said. We can save what fire cannot destroy. A deep boom reverberated above them, closer now. The floor trembled. Dust filled the air. Thalia grabbed Callista's wrist. We have to move the last manuscripts, she said. Into the second vault, before the flames reach the stairs. Callista nodded, wiping her eyes. No matter what happens, she whispered, the library will not die tonight. Lysandra looked at her with something like pride. That, she said, is the voice of a guardian. Callista swallowed. I'm not a guardian. Lysandra smiled. You will be. She placed a final scroll into Callista's hands, heavy, wrapped in golden linen. What is this? Callista asked. A map, Lysandra said. Of what? Of the parts of the world that no longer exist. Callista held the scroll tightly. Why give it to me? Lysandra's voice softened. Because if the library falls, someone must carry what it remembers. Callista felt her breath catch in her throat. Carry it where? Wherever memory survives, Lysandra whispered. A violent crash interrupted them. The unmistakable sound of the outer columns collapsing. Flames roared above. The lamps flickered, their flames rising high in defiance. Callista closed her eyes, heart racing, holding the golden-wrapped scroll against her chest. The darkness outside the hall thickened. The fire above spread. The library, alive, trembling, ancient, began to fight back the only way it knew. By refusing to forget. Even beneath layers of stone, Callista could feel the heat, dull at first, like a breath against the walls, then sharper, heavier, seeping downward like a living creature hunting for air. The scent of smoke slid between the cracks of the ancient ceiling, curling into the hall of lamps in thin gray threads. Some librarians pressed hands over their mouths. Some whispered prayers to forgotten gods. Some simply kept working, steady hands wrapping scrolls that carried the voices of civilizations long turned to dust. Callista stood in the center of the hall, clutching the golden-wrapped scroll Lysandra had given her. Above, another crash shook the ground, closer, harsher, echoing through the stone like the crack of thunder against mountains. The lamps trembled violently, their flames bending as if pushed by a wind that came from no door. Callista whispered, "They're breaking everything." Thalia pulled her close. "Focus on what you can control, child. The library has survived tragedies bigger than this." Callista looked up. Her eyes caught the trembling shadows dancing along the ceiling. But has it ever survived hatred? Thalia's answer came late. Not without cost. Before Callista could respond, Lysandra strode into the hall, dust covering her robe, a thin cut across her cheek, her braid loosened. She looked as if she had been fighting the building itself. "Maria," she called, "take the children deeper into the second vault." Maria nodded, rushing past Callista with the refugee child in her arms. Another librarian followed with two more young ones, their faces pale with confusion and fear. Thalia turned to Lysandra. "How bad is it?" Lysandra wiped ash from her forehead. "The west wing is gone." A gasp rippled across the room. "And the astronomy chamber," Thalia whispered. "A burning." Callista felt her chest tighten. "But the star maps." "Some are lost," Lysandra said, voice low. "But we must focus on what can still be saved." Callista stepped forward. "What do you need me to do?" Lysandra looked at her for a long moment. "You need to be brave." "I'm trying," Callista whispered. Lysandra placed both her hands on Callista's shoulders. "Bravery isn't loud," she said softly. "It isn't fire. It isn't battle. Bravery is choosing to move even when the world tells you to freeze." Callista swallowed hard. "I'll move," she said. "Just tell me where." "Come," Lysandra said. They hurried toward the chamber entrance. The stone corridor outside glowed faintly with reflected orange light, fire pressing downward, seeking air, pushing itself deeper into the library like an invading army. Callista gripped the golden-wrapped scroll tightly as they navigated the narrow passage. "Where are we going?" Callista asked. "To the root room," Lysandra said. Callista frowned. "The what?" "It's the oldest chamber of all," Lysandra said. "Older than the library, older than the city, maybe older than memory itself." Callista blinked, confused. "But why go there?" Lysandra didn't answer immediately. Because the answer was heavy. Finally, she said, "Because the library's heart is there." They turned a corner, descending a steep staircase. The walls here were colder than before, the air thicker, as if the weight of centuries pressed down in layers unseen. The stairway seemed endless, down and down, deeper into the earth until the sound of burning above became only a distant echo. At the bottom, Lysandra stopped in front of a carved stone door. Unlike the others, this door held no paint, no decoration, only a single symbol etched deep into its center. A spiral. A simple. A silent. Ancient. Place your hand here, Lysandra instructed. Callista hesitated. What will this do? It will recognize you, Lysandra said. And opens. Callista pressed her palm against the stone. Immediately, a faint warmth bloomed beneath her skin. The symbol glowed softly, golden at first, then white, then fading into a deep, steady blue. The ground vibrated. Callista held her breath. The stone door slid open with a low groan. Inside, the room was small, barely big enough for 5 people. But the walls shimmered with ancient carvings, spirals, waves, stars, eyes, symbols Callista had never studied yet somehow recognized. At the center of the room stood a pedestal. Empty. Callista frowned. What is supposed to be here? Memory, Lysandra said quietly. Callista turned to her. What do you mean? Lysandra walked to the pedestal and placed her hand on its surface. This room was built for the purpose of preservation, she said. This is where the earliest librarians once placed the most important scrolls, before there were shelves, before there were lamps, before there were even halls. Callista waited. But over time, Lysandra continued, it became something else, a place not for scrolls but for keepers. Callista's pulse slowed. And for keepers. Yes, Lysandra said, turning to her. For people who could carry memory when stone could not. Callista felt the golden-wrapped scroll grow heavier in her arms. Lysandra, she whispered, why bring me? Because the library chose you, Lysandra said, stepping closer. And because this. She touched the scroll Callista held. It belongs to a living keeper. Callista shook her head. I'm not ready. Lysandra smiled gently. No keeper ever is. Callista's voice trembled. I don't even know what being a keeper means. It means, Lysandra said quietly, that if the library falls, its memory will not. Callista felt her heart collapse inward. You want me to carry it, she whispered. Carry everything. Not everything, Lysandra said. Oh, but enough. Callista looked down at the scroll, tears pooling in her eyes. What if I fail? Lysandra cupped her face gently. Then someone else will rise. That is how memory survives. That is how the world continues. A deep rumble shook the chamber. Dust rained from the ceiling. Thalia rushed into the doorway, breathless. Lysandra, the fire has reached the lower stair. Lysandra's eyes hardened. It's time. Callista wiped her tears, her hands shaking. What do I do? Lysandra guided her to the pedestal. Place the scroll here, she whispered. Callista did. The pedestal glowed. The carvings on the walls brightened. Light pulsed softly, slow, gentle, like breathing. Thalia stepped closer, her voice a tremor. The library, it's responding. Callista stepped back, heart pounding. What's happening? Lysandra whispered. It's remembering you. The light grew brighter. The carvings shifted, spirals curling, stars forming new patterns, waves rising then falling. The entire room seemed to come alive. Callista felt the vibration in her bones. A soft, warm wind, impossible underground, moved through the chamber, brushing against her cheeks like a hand made of memory. She closed her eyes. The roar of the fire above faded. The screams blurred. The rumbling paused. For a moment, there was only breath. Only light. Only the library. And then, as if speaking in a language older than sound, the library whispered. The whisper settled into Callista's bones, soft, warm, impossibly ancient. It was not a voice in the way human voices were. It carried no breath, no accent, no edge. Yet she understood it, in the deepest form of understanding. Not with her mind, but with her memory. The pedestal pulsed with gentle blue light. The walls shimmered like moonlit water. Every carved spiral seemed to awaken, shifting their shapes as if stretching after 1,000 years of sleep. Callista's knees trembled. "Lysandra," she whispered, "what is happening to me?" Lysandra stepped forward, her face half lit by the glow, her voice steady even as fear flickered in her eyes. "The library is recognizing you," she said softly. "It's choosing a keeper. It chose you." Callista shook her head. "I don't understand. Why me? I'm just a girl from a fishing village. I don't know enough." "You know more than you think," Thalia interrupted gently. "When you read, you see the pattern beneath the words. When you listen, you hear the echo beneath the sound. And when you touch memory—" She gestured to the glowing room. "Memory responds." Callista's chest tightened. "But I'm afraid." Thalia cupped her shoulders. "Fear is what keeps memory alive. Those who feel no fear forget too easily." Another shift rolled through the chamber. This one stronger, deeper. A tremor rising from the pedestal, like a slow heartbeat. The carved symbols glowed brighter, stars rotating, waves rippling, spirals turning inward then outward. Callista covered her ears, expecting noise, but there was none. Instead, a flood of images burst across her vision. Scrolls burning in a city far away. Women whispering knowledge to their daughters at midnight. A healer mapping herbs onto papyrus. A mother teaching her child to read by candlelight. A midwife recording births during a sandstorm. A voyager carrying stolen manuscripts wrapped inside her cloak. A scholar sinking into the sea, clutching a waterproof jar of notes. A young girl in a distant village copying letters into the sand. A librarian hiding codices beneath the floorboards during an invasion. A queen learning astronomy in secret. A dying teacher whispering her last lesson to her apprentice. Callista gasped. Her hands flew to her face. "Make it stop," she choked. But Lysandra held her firmly. "No," she said. "Let it fill you. Let the memory choose its place." Callista shook, tears spilling down her cheeks. "It's too much. It's too many lives, too many stories." "That is what the library is," Thalia whispered. 1,000 years of voices. You are simply hearing all of them at once. Callista's legs gave out, and she collapsed to her knees. The images kept coming. A woman hiding scrolls beneath her sleeping child. A scribe copying a forbidden text under a blood-red moon. A nurse recording the names of the dying during a plague. A group of enslaved women secretly teaching each other numbers. A girl who secretly added her own thoughts in tiny letters between the lines of a scroll. A priestess chanting over papyrus soaked in oils to preserve knowledge. Every moment carved itself into Callista's bones, like gentle fire. And then, suddenly, a silence. The deep. A still. Eternal. Callista lifted her head, breathing hard. The light dimmed. The carvings settled. The pedestal cooled. It was over. Thalia knelt beside her, brushing tears from Callista's cheek with a trembling thumb. You endured it, she whispered. No one ever takes the memory without breaking, but you. Lysandra finished the thought. You did not break. Callista shook her head weakly. I felt like I was dying. You were not dying, Lysandra said. You were becoming. Callista lowered her gaze. What am I now? Lysandra sat beside her and took her hand. In her voice, for the first time, there was unmistakable reverence. You are a living vault, she said. One the fire cannot burn, one the invaders cannot steal, one the world cannot silence. Callista swallowed. But I'm just one person. Lysandra smiled. Memory does not need armies, she said. It survives through one, then another, then another. A deep rumble shook the chamber again, this time from above. Thalia stood quickly. The fire has reached the first vault. Callista's heart lurched. What about the scrolls we couldn't move? Thalia's eyes glistened. We honor what we save, not what we lose. Lysandra rose, pulling Callista gently to her feet. There is no time, she said. We must leave this chamber now. Callista stumbled as she stood, her body still humming with the weight of 1,000 memories. Above them, something cracked, loud and sharp, like a pillar giving way. Fire roared through the stairwell. The sound of splintering, wood echoed like screams. Callista turned to the pedestal. What about the rest of the knowledge, the scrolls, the codices? Lysandra's voice softened. Callista, some things will burn tonight. Callista's lips trembled. I can't let them. You cannot stop fire, Lysandra said. But you can carry memory. Callista clutched the golden scroll again, pressing it to her chest. Thalia placed a hand on her back. Child, she whispered, you are enough. Callista closed her eyes. When she opened them, something within her had hardened. Not cold, not cruel, but clear, like glass forged by flame. Then tell me what to do, she said quietly. Lysandra took a deep breath. You will escape, she said. Take the memory where fire cannot follow. Callista froze. Escape, she whispered. But what about all of you? Thalia looked at her with kind, steady eyes. Every keeper has a moment when she must choose, she said. Choose what? Callista whispered. Whether she will hold the past, Thalia said. Or die with it. Callista's knees weakened. Lysandra cupped her face gently. Listen to me, she whispered. You must live. But the libraries. Lysandra's voice cracked for the first time. The library is inside you. Tears streamed down Callista's cheeks. I don't want to do this alone. You won't, Lysandra said. We will stay as long as the walls hold. You will go where memory leads. A massive crash sounded above them. Stone collapsing. A great column giving way. Ash rained from the ceiling. The lamps flickered violently. "Go," Thalia whispered. "Before the path closes." Callista clutched the golden scroll, her hands trembling. "I'm scared," she whispered. Lysandra kissed her forehead. "Then run with your fear," she said. "Fear remembers the way." And then the lamps dimmed. The flames shrank. The air thickened. The roar of the fire became louder. And Lysandra looked at Callista with one final, fierce, unbroken gaze. "Go." Callista turned and ran. Callista's footsteps echoed through the narrow stone corridors, the golden-wrapped scroll pressed tightly to her chest. The hall behind her glowed faintly with the last flickers of the whispering lamps. Ahead, the passage twisted like the inside of a labyrinth, shifting light, shifting shadows, shifting air. The fire followed. She could hear it. Not as crackling flame, but as a steady, suffocating roar. Like a beast drawing breath before it devoured the world. Her lungs tightened with each exhale. Sweat mixed with dust on her skin. Her braids slapped against her back as she ran. She reached a fork in the passage. Left or right? Callista froze for a split second. Then she heard it. A faint hum. The same hum she felt in the Hall of Lamps. The same hum she felt in the root room. The voice of memory. She turned left. The corridor narrowed, sloping upward. The ceiling lowered. Her torch flickered violently. The roar grew louder. "Please," she whispered. Voice raw. "Let me make it. Let them still be alive." She wasn't even sure who she meant. Lysandra. Thalia. Maria. The children. The guardians she barely knew. Everyone. The torchlight shook. A burst of hot air blasted down the slope. Callista shielded her face as sparks rained over her. The fire was reaching the lower chambers. She ran harder. Her sandals slapped against the stone. Her breath turned ragged. Her fingers ached from gripping the scroll. A section of ceiling collapsed behind her. Stone smashing against stone. Dust exploding into the air. Callista didn't look back. She kept moving until she reached a small alcove carved into the wall. Not a chamber. More like a hidden niche. A dead end. Or was it? She pressed her hand to the stone, closing her eyes, feeling for the hum. At first, nothing. Then, a faint vibration. As she pushed, the hidden wall slid open. A breath of cold air swept over her, carrying the scent of the sea. Callista stepped inside. The hidden chamber was small, barely larger than a storeroom, but its far wall opened into a narrow tunnel filled with salty mist. A sea tunnel. She exhaled in relief. The fire wouldn't follow the wet stone all the way to the ocean. She stepped forward, then stopped. Voices. Faint, muffled, echoing through the stone. She strained to listen. Not screams. Not soldiers. Women. Lysandra's voice. Thalia's voice. Others she could not name. Callista turned back toward the passage she had come through. Her breath faltered. They were still alive. She took a step toward the fire. No, she whispered to herself. I can't leave them. She turned fully, ready to run back. But then, a violent tremor shook the chamber, so strong it knocked her off her feet. The roaring above intensified into a deafening thunder. And then, a collapse. A massive one. Stone grinding against stone. Beams snapping. Flames roaring down like a tidal wave of heat. Callista screamed and ducked, covering her head. Dust filled her lungs. When the sound settled, when the air cleared just enough to breathe, she saw it. The passage she had used was gone. Buried. Sealed. Crushed under tons of stone and fire. Her heartbeat stumbled. No, she whispered. Lysandra Thalia. She pressed her hands against the collapsed wall, pushing with all her strength, knowing it was useless. The stone didn't move. She pressed her forehead to the cold surface. Hot tears fell down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. The fire rumbled on the other side. Hungry, merciless. Callista's voice cracked. You told me to run. But I didn't want to leave you. Silence answered. Then, the faint hum returned. Not from the wall. Not from the scroll. From inside her. A warm pulse. Stronger than fear. Stronger than sorrow. Stronger than fire. Memories. Callista wiped her tears and stood slowly. I don't deserve this, she whispered. But I won't waste it. She turned toward the sea tunnel. The air grew colder as she advanced. Her footsteps softened against damp stone. The distant roar of the ocean replaced the roar of the flames. The tunnel wound downward until the ground leveled out. Moonlight shimmered faintly at the far end, reflected in a thin sheet of water. Callista stepped into the shallow tide, her sandals soaked instantly. She followed the light until she emerged into an open cavern. The sea stretched before her. Calm, dark, wide as eternity. Waves lapped gently against the cavern walls. Callista inhaled deeply. Salt filled her lungs. The cold breeze stung her tear-streaked face. She clutched the scroll tightly. Behind her, the library burned. Ahead, the world waited. A wave washed over her feet. Callista whispered into the night. I remembers. The sea wind shifted, lifting the edges of her robe. As if answering, Callista stepped forward. If she followed the coastline, she would reach the fishing town where she once lived. Beyond that, villages, travelers, scholars, strangers who might shelter her. Beyond that, new libraries, new keepers, new generations waiting for forgotten stories. She took another step. I will carry them, she whispered. All of them's. The moonlight reflected off the golden linen of the scroll. Callista held it close. I will not let the world forget. And with the roar of the burning library behind her, and the whisper of the ancient sea ahead, Callista began to walk into the night. A lone girl carrying the memory of 1,000 years. A keeper. A witness. A voice the fire could not silence. Callista stepped out of the cavern and into the night. A night illuminated only by the moon. A night filled with the quiet breathing of the sea. The wind pressed against her robe, carrying strands of her hair across her face. As if the world itself whispered, "You are not alone." She didn't know how far she walked along the coastline. Minutes blended into hours. Footsteps merged with waves. Her tears dried with the salt air. Behind her, the faint red glow of the library crackled against the sky. Like a dying star, refusing to surrender its last light. Callista couldn't bear to turn and look. Every heartbeat felt like a betrayal. Every breath carried the weight of those she left behind. But she walked. Because if she stopped, if she gave in to grief, the memory would die with her. And the library had chosen her to live. The scroll pressed to her chest grew heavier with each step. Not with physical weight, but with the unbearable responsibility of holding centuries within human hands. She whispered into the quiet, "Lysandra Thalia, I'm still moving. I promise I won't stop." The wind carried her voice into the darkness. Callista walked until the coastline curved, revealing a small inlet where fishermen once docked their boats. Now the shore was empty, only broken nets, a few abandoned baskets, and footprints washed away by the tide. The world seemed unchanged. And yet, everything inside Callista had shifted. She paused at the edge of a tide pool. Her reflection wavered in the moonlit water. Familiar and unfamiliar at once. Her eyes, once soft with curiosity, now held the weight of centuries. Her shoulders, once slight and hesitant, now carried the burden of a forgotten world. She knelt beside the pool, letting the cold water wash sand from her hands. The golden-wrapped scroll glowed softly under moonlight. Callista whispered, "I don't know how to protect you, but I will try." She closed her eyes. The hum inside her chest pulsed gently. The memory breathing with her, speaking without words. A sudden sound broke the silence. Footsteps. Callista's head snapped up. Shadows shifted near the rocks a few yards away. Her pulse quickened. Were they soldiers? Refugees? Thieves? Or simply fishermen returning late? She clutched the scroll and stood slowly. A figure emerged, a woman tall and cloaked, her silhouette lit by the moon. Her steps were careful but steady, as if she had walked this coastline 1,000 times. Callista's voice wavered. "Who are you?" The woman hesitated. Then she lifted her hood. Her face was lined with age. But her eyes held a depth Callista recognized instantly. A keeper's eyes. The woman exhaled softly. "I've been waiting for you." Callista froze. "What?" The woman stepped closer. "When the fire began, we felt it, across the coast, across the border, the memory trembled, it reached us." "Us," Callista whispered. The woman nodded. "There are keepers scattered across the world. We are few. We are quiet. But we listen." Callista stared at her, stunned. "We heard the library call for help," the woman continued. "And we came." Callista felt her knees weaken. You knew the library was in danger. We felt it, the woman said. Memory always warns its daughters. Tears filled Callista's eyes. You came too late, she whispered. The woman's gaze softened. No keeper arrives late, she said gently. We arrive when the memory chooses us. Callista shook her head. The library burned. Lysandra Thalia. Everyone's. The woman touched her shoulder. Loss does not erase what was kept. You survived. And you are carrying what matters. Callista looked down at the scroll in her arms. I don't even know what it contains. You will. In time. The woman motioned for Callista to follow. Come, there are others waiting. Callista hesitated, glancing back at the faint red glow on the horizon. Will the library be remembered? She whispered. The woman smiled, a smile filled with sorrow and hope intertwined. If you remember it, she said, it will never die. Callista followed her along the shoreline. The cliffs rose on their right, carved by centuries of wind and water. The sea stretched endlessly to their left, dark, vast, eternal. After several minutes, the woman spoke again. What is your name? Callista. The woman nodded. A good name, it means the most beautiful. But not for your appearance. For your heart. Callista swallowed, her voice trembling. What is yours? The woman paused. Irene. Callista blinked. That means. Peace, Irene said. Yes, it was not given lightly. They reached a small cove hidden between two cliffs. There, by a low fire, stood 3 more women of different ages, one with snow-white hair, one middle-aged, and one barely older than Callista. They all turned as Irene approached. This is the child the library chose, Irene said quietly. Callista froze under their gazes. She expected judgment. Doubt. Questions she couldn't answer. Instead, the oldest woman stepped forward with gentle eyes. Welcome, daughter, she said. You've walked through fire. Callista's throat tightened. I left them behind, she whispered. Lysandra Thalia. The woman touched her cheek softly. And in doing so, you carried them with you. Callista lowered her gaze, tears returning. Irene motioned for her to sit by the fire. The flames cast warm light on the rocks, reflecting in the tide pools like scattered stars. Callista sat slowly. The other women formed a circle around her. What happens now? Callista asked. Irene folded her hands. Now, she said, we teach you what it means to be a keeper. Callista's voice trembled. I don't feel ready. Irene smiled. No keeper ever is. A long silence settled. The waves whispered against the sand. The fire cracked softly. Finally, the youngest woman in the circle leaned forward. Callista, she said. What did the library say to you? Callista closed her eyes. A gentle hum pulsed inside her. She opened her eyes slowly. Her voice soft but steady. It said, remembers. The circle of women bowed their heads. That, Irene whispered, is the beginning of every keeper. Callista held the scroll closer. What will I do with it? You will carry it, Irene said. And one day, you will pass it on. Callista looked at the fire. Will there ever be another library? She asked quietly. Irene's voice softened. Perhaps. But bricks and scrolls do not make a library. People do. Callista breathed deeply. So I am a library, she whispered. Irene touched her shoulder gently. You are memory. You are voice. You are witness. You are keepers. Callista closed her eyes. For the first time since the fire, the hum inside her grew warm, steady, calm. Not painful. Not overwhelming. Alive. She looked at the women around her. Faces lit by the fire. Eyes filled with understanding. She whispered, I will remembers. The waves answered. By the time dawn approached, the red glow had faded into a haunting gray smoke that rose in thin spirals above the distant ruins of the library. The sea breeze carried the last embers away, scattering them across the horizon like fading memories. Callista sat near the small fire with the women, keepers like herself, though she still struggled to believe she belonged among them. The golden-wrapped scroll rested across her lap, warm against her skin, as if holding a steady heartbeat. She had not slept. The night had been too heavy for sleep. Yet she did not feel broken. Just changed. Irene, the eldest keeper, watched the sunrise with a calm expression. The sky turned shades of lavender and soft gold, quiet and gentle, as if unaware of the tragedy that had unfolded beneath it. The world keeps turning, Irene murmured. It does not pause for sorrow. Callista lowered her gaze. Should it? Irene shook her head. No, because if it paused, grief would swallow us whole. The words settled deep in Callista's chest. The middle-aged keeper, Selene, approached with a clay cup of warm herbal water. Drink, she said softly. It will settle your breath. Callista accepted it with both hands. The steam curled upward, carrying the scent of mint and sage. She sipped slowly, letting the warmth spread through her. Selene sat down beside her. You saw the collapse, she said. Callista nodded, throat tightening. I heard their voices, then the stone fell. I couldn't go back, I couldn't reach them. Selene touched her arm gently. Not all endings are tragic, she whispered. Some are beginnings disguised as loss. Callista's eyes filled with tears. What beginning could possibly come from this? Selene looked at the golden scroll, resting in Callista's lap. You. Callista's breath caught. Irene turned to her, her voice steady. Do you know why the library chose you? Callista shook her head. Irene folded her hands. Because you remember the small things, she said. Not just stories and words, but feelings, people, moments. She continued. Knowledge is not kept by those who chase greatness. It is kept by those who listen. Callista looked down, tears falling silently. I didn't want this, she whispered. I wanted to learn, to read, to help copy scrolls. I never thought I would carry all of this. And yet, Irene said, here you are. The youngest keeper, Lavinia, approached hesitantly. Callista, she said softly, what did you love most about the library? Callista exhaled shakily. The people, she whispered. Lysandra, Thalia, even Maria. The way they spoke about knowledge like it was alive. The way they cared for every scroll as if it held a beating heart. Lavinia smiled. That is why you will carry it well. Callista brushed a thumb across the golden linen of the scroll. What's inside this? She asked. Irene answered. It contains a map of the world that no longer exists. Places swallowed by time. Rivers that have shifted. Stars that have changed. Callista frowned. But why give it to me? Irene looked at her with gentle certainty. Because you will rebuild the world in memory. Callista froze. Rebuild, she whispered. Yes, Irene said. Not with stone, not with paper, but with voice. The words struck her like a soft blow. A keeper was not a librarian. A keeper was a living archive. Callista closed her eyes. The hum inside her stirred again. Steady, warm, ancient, almost like a guiding hand. She opened her eyes slowly. What happens now? She asked. Irene stood and motioned for Callista to rise as well. Now, she said. We walk. Callista hesitated. To where? Irene looked toward the rising sun. To the next place where memory is needed. Callista swallowed. Where is that? The older keeper smiled. The world will show us. The women gathered their few belongings, simple satchels, a clay jar or two, a blanket. Callista noticed they carried no scrolls, no tablets, no books. Just themselves. And now hers. As they prepared to leave the cove, Callista paused to look back one last time at the distant plume of smoke rising where the library had once stood. The wind carried its ashes across the sea. She pressed the golden scroll to her chest. I will remember you, she whispered to the ruins. Every stone. Every word. Every soul. A sharp pain tightened in her throat, not grief exactly, but something deeper. Love. She loved that library. She loved the people inside it. And she would not let them die. Callista turned and followed the keepers up a narrow path carved into the cliffside. The morning sun warmed their backs as they walked, their silhouettes long across the rocks. The sea glittered below them. Gulls cried overhead. The world looked peaceful, too peaceful for the wound she carried. Yet the pace of the keepers was steady, purposeful, almost gentle. They walked as if they belonged to the earth itself. After an hour, Irene spoke again. There will come a time, Callista, she said, when you must speak the memory aloud. Callista nodded slowly. And who will listen? She asked. Irene answered softly. A girl like you, somewhere, someday. Callista felt something shift inside her. Not pain. Not fear. But a quiet opening. A place where courage could grow. As the path widened into a grassy bluff overlooking the sea, Callista stopped. The wind lifted her hair, her robe, the edges of the golden scroll. She whispered, I promise. I will not let the world forget. Irene turned back to her and nodded. That, she said, is all any keeper has ever sworn. Callista took a deep breath. The hum inside her pulsed, gently in agreement. She stepped forward. Toward the world. Toward the unknown. Toward the countless people who would never know her name, but would live because she remembered theirs. Callista walked on, her silhouette framed by the rising sun, carrying 1,000 years within her hands. Her voice, her heart, a lone keeper of a fallen library. Yet not alone at all. Because memory does not die. Not when even one soul carries it onward. And Callista would carry it across empires, across oceans, across generations. A girl who walked with memory. A living library. A witness the fire could not silence.